Ethan Carter never thought helping his sister would lead to the biggest humiliation of his life. He had spent years working late nights at the auto shop, taking extra shifts and skipping vacations just to save enough money to feel stable. He wasn't rich, but he was proud of being responsible. So when Madison, his younger sister, came to him in tears saying she couldn't afford her interior design degree, he didn't even hesitate. He handed her the $30,000 he had saved and told her that nothing mattered more than her future. He felt good about it, too. Madison had always been the creative one in the family, and he believed she deserved a chance to follow her dreams. He never once thought about getting the money back. He just wanted to help her become someone she could be proud of. And for a while, everything seemed fine. She thanked him, hugged him, and promised she would make him proud. But things started to change once she entered school. She became more distant, visiting less, calling less, always saying she was too busy. Ethan tried not to take it personally. He told himself she was simply adjusting to college life. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Still, he kept supporting her whenever she needed something. If her books were expensive, he paid. If she needed materials for a project, he helped without question. Every time she told him she was stressed, he told her to focus on her studies and let him worry about the rest. He sincerely believed family meant helping without keeping score. As the years went by, Ethan imagined how proud he would be at her graduation. He pictured himself sitting in the audience, cheering when her name was called. He thought maybe she would mention him in her speech, or at least acknowledge how he had carried her through school. But what happened instead was something he never expected. At her graduation dinner, surrounded by relatives and people from her program, Ethan felt completely out of place. Everyone there seemed polished and confident, while he wore his best shirt that still felt a little too simple for the room. But he didn't care. He was there for Madison. When she stood up to thank people for supporting her journey, he waited for his name. He waited for even a small nod or a smile in his direction. But she didn't mention him once. She thanked professors, classmates, and even a neighbor who once gave her design magazines. Ethan tried to convince himself she simply forgot, but it became impossible when he quietly asked her afterward why she didn't mention him. Her response hit him like a punch to the chest. In front of everyone, she snapped that he barely contributed anything, and that he needed to stop acting like he owned her success. The room fell silent. People stared. Ethan felt the heat rise in his face, not from anger but from deep humiliation. It was in that moment he realized the sister he sacrificed so much for had completely changed, and not for the better. He didn't know it yet, but this betrayal was only the beginning of something even deeper, something that would push him to a point he never thought he'd reach. When Madison started college, Ethan expected her to be busy, but he didn't expect her to slowly pull away from him. At first, it was small things: missed calls, short replies, canceled visits. Ethan didn't think too much about it. He told himself she was adjusting to a new environment, new classes, new friends. But as time went on, the distance didn't fade. It grew. Whenever he stopped by campus to drop off supplies she said she needed, she looked uncomfortable, almost nervous. She would meet him outside instead of letting him walk with her into the building. If students or professors walked by, she would step away from him, acting like she didn't want to be seen standing too close. Ethan noticed it, but he didn't want to believe she was embarrassed of him. He wore his clean work uniform proudly, and he always came straight from the auto shop because she said she needed things quickly. He thought she would be happy to see him making an effort. But she wasn't. One time he offered to help carry her project boards to class, and she quickly said no, insisting she didn't want to bother him. Ethan could tell it wasn't about bothering. It was about appearances. It hurt, but he forced himself to stay calm. Maybe she was just stressed. College could do that to people. Then there were the introductions, or the lack of them. Whenever a classmate or professor passed by, Madison avoided eye contact, as if she didn't want anyone to ask who he was. Once, a professor actually smiled and tried to greet Ethan, but Madison immediately cut her off, saying she had to rush to class. She walked away without even letting Ethan speak. He stood there feeling confused. He didn't expect a big introduction, but pretending he wasn't there was something he never imagined she would do. Ethan didn't say anything. He didn't want to start an argument. He knew Madison liked to fit in, and he didn't want to make her uncomfortable. He reminded himself that he was doing all of this out of love. If she was stressed, he wanted to be patient. But then he overheard something that stayed with him. Madison was talking to a group of groupmates, and one of them asked how she managed to afford all her materials. Madison laughed it off and said she worked hard for it, and that she never depended on anyone. She said it so confidently that for a moment Ethan wondered if she even remembered who paid her tuition. It wasn't just that she left him out. She made it sound like she didn't have help at all. He didn't confront her. He didn't want to embarrass her in front of her classmates. Instead, he left quietly, telling himself that maybe she didn't want people to think she came from a family that struggled financially. He tried to understand it from her point of view, even though it stung. As the months passed, she continued to pretend she was doing everything on her own. She talked about her hard work and independence, ignoring the support that made her education possible. Ethan kept hoping things would change, but every visit, every conversation, every small interaction showed him that Madison was becoming someone he barely recognized. She wasn't just busy. She wasn't just stressed. She was becoming ashamed of the same brother who had sacrificed years of savings for her future. And that realization was something Ethan struggled to accept, even as he tried to hold on to the belief that she would eventually understand the value of what he had done for her. The graduation dinner was supposed to be one of the proudest days of Ethan's life. He had pictured it so many times, Madison smiling, the family gathered around, everyone celebrating the hard work she had put in. He imagined sitting there knowing he had played a part in helping her reach this moment. He expected warmth, gratitude, maybe even a small moment of acknowledgement. But what happened was the complete opposite. The restaurant was filled with people Ethan didn't recognize. Madison had invited several classmates, a few professors, and some people from the design firm where she had recently interned. Everyone looked polished, dressed in stylish outfits, carrying themselves with confidence. Ethan felt out of place in his simple button-down shirt, but he didn't mind. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was just there to support his sister. Throughout the evening, Madison barely spoke to him. She was busy laughing with her new friends, talking about future job opportunities, and sharing stories from her final year. Every time Ethan tried to join a conversation, she gave short answers or glanced at her friends as if she wanted him to stop talking. He felt the distance more clearly than ever, but he kept quiet. He didn't want to make the night about himself. When it came time for Madison to give a small speech, everyone tapped their glasses and turned their attention to her. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the moment she would mention him. Maybe everything would make sense. Maybe all the hurt from the past years would be worth it. Madison began by thanking her professors for guiding her. Then she thanked her classmates for supporting her through hard projects. She even thanked a neighbor for giving her design books when she was younger. She smiled brightly, spoke confidently, and looked proud. But not once did her eyes land on Ethan. Not once did she mention his support, his sacrifices, or the role he played in her journey. Ethan sat there waiting. He kept telling himself she might save it for the end, but she finished her speech, lifted her glass, and sat back down. The people around her clapped loudly. Ethan clapped too, though his hands felt heavy. When the applause died down, he leaned in quietly and asked, almost in a whisper, "You didn't mention me. Did you forget?" He expected maybe a gentle explanation. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe she didn't know what to say. But instead, Madison turned toward him with a harsh expression, and her voice came out louder than she intended. "Why would I mention you? You barely contributed anything. Stop acting like you're the reason I'm successful." Her words cut straight through the room. Conversation stopped. Forks paused in midair. People stared, unsure whether to look at Madison or Ethan. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ethan froze. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He felt eyes on him, judging him, pitying him, wondering what he had done wrong. He wanted to shrink into his seat, disappear, escape the shame crawling over his skin. He hadn't expected praise, but he had never imagined being belittled in front of strangers. The sister he had supported through every hardship had just erased his value in the cruelest way possible. In that silent, heavy moment, Ethan understood that what happened wasn't an accident. It wasn't stress. It wasn't pressure. Madison truly believed she didn't owe him anything, not even respect. And that realization hurt more than anything she had ever said to him before. When the dinner finally ended, Ethan hoped he could pull Madison aside and clear the air. He thought maybe the pressure of the event had made her snap, or maybe she didn't realize how hurtful her words were. He waited until most of the guests had left, giving her space and trying not to embarrass her. He approached her gently, hoping for even the smallest apology. But Madison wasn't interested in apologizing. She was irritated, tapping her phone, adjusting her purse, acting like she couldn't wait to get away from him. When Ethan softly said, Madison, can we talk for a second? She rolled her eyes like he was inconveniencing her. He tried to keep his voice steady. What you said in there, it was harsh. I just want to understand why. Madison didn't hesitate. Because you make everything about yourself, she snapped. You think paying for my tuition gives you some kind of special place in my life. I never asked for your help. You chose to give it. Ethan stared at her, stunned. For a moment, he wondered if he had heard her correctly. She never asked? He remembered the desperate phone call, the fear in her voice, the tears. He remembered her saying she couldn't do it alone. You were crying, he said quietly. You said you needed me. She shrugged like it didn't matter. I was stressed. People say things when they're stressed. It doesn't mean I wanted you to control my future. Control? Ethan repeated, confused. I never tried to control anything. I just wanted to help. Madison crossed her arms. Well, I don't need your help anymore. And I don't want you showing up at my events, at my new job, or anywhere else. My life is moving forward, and you're stuck in the same place. I don't want people thinking I'm tied to that. That? Ethan asked. You mean me? Your brother? She didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said enough. She wasn't embarrassed by what he did. She was embarrassed by who he was. She didn't want people to know her degree came from someone who worked in a garage. She didn't want her new contacts to see her family as working class. She wanted a clean slate, free from anything that didn't fit the picture she was trying to paint. Ethan felt something in him crack, but he forced himself to stay calm. Madison, I never wanted anything from you. Not praise, not attention. Just respect. That's all. Madison shook her head. Well, stop expecting it. You act like you sacrificed everything, but you didn't. You just paid some bills. That doesn't mean you get to insert yourself into my life forever. Her words were sharp, cold, delivered without an ounce of hesitation. Ethan realized she meant every single one of them. He stepped back, feeling his chest tighten. He had given up so much money, time, comfort, because he believed in her. And now she was treating him like a burden she needed to cut off. Just stay out of my career, she added. I don't want your involvement. I don't need it, and I don't want people thinking I owe you anything. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply nodded and walked away, each step heavier than the last. That moment was the point where something inside him truly broke. Not out of anger, but out of the painful understanding that the sister he loved had no space for him in the life he helped build. Weeks passed after the graduation dinner, and Ethan did everything Madison asked. He stayed away, stopped checking in, and tried to focus on his own life. He didn't want to cause problems or make her uncomfortable. Even though her words still hurt, he hoped giving her space would help things settle down. He wanted to believe she would eventually understand how unfair she had been. But things changed the day one of Madison's former classmates stopped by Ethan's auto shop. Ethan was working under a car when the young man recognized him from the graduation dinner and struck up a conversation. He mentioned that Madison had been lucky to get so much hands-on experience at her brother's shop. Ethan froze, wondering what the man meant. What experience? Ethan asked, pulling off his gloves. You know, the classmate said casually, her apprenticeship. She told us her brother let her redesign the office space and work on the business layout for class credits. She put that on her internship paperwork, too. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Madison had never worked a single day with him. She had never redesigned anything. She had never even walked inside the office area of his shop except to drop off food once or twice. Trying to stay calm, he asked a few more questions. The classmate went on, saying Madison often talked about how she paid her own tuition and how she had built everything from scratch without relying on family. She even claimed Ethan had nothing to do with her education or her opportunities. Hearing it from someone else made it far more painful. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment outburst. Madison had rewritten her entire story, and in her version, Ethan didn't exist at all. Later that week, Ethan's suspicion grew stronger when he found a letter addressed to the auto shop from a design company. It wasn't for him, it was a reference check for Madison. They wanted to confirm her apprenticeship duties and verify she had completed design-related tasks under his supervision. Ethan stared at the letter for a long time. This wasn't just lying to classmates or friends. She had used his business, his name, and his reputation to back up something that never happened. If he didn't respond honestly, he would be lying to a professional company. If he did respond honestly, they would discover she had falsified her application. He called Madison, hoping this was some sort of mistake. She answered with her usual irritated tone, like talking to him was an inconvenience. "Why is a design firm asking about an apprenticeship at my shop?" Ethan asked carefully. Madison sighed loudly. "Oh, that. It's just something I put on my application. Relax. They won't bother you. Everyone lies a little. It's normal." "Madison," Ethan said, struggling to stay calm. "You never worked here. You never even asked me." "So what?" she snapped. "I needed experience. It's not like your shop is some big deal. No one will care." "That's my business," he said quietly. "You used my name, my address, my work." She laughed dismissively. "Don't be dramatic. You should be happy I even mention your place. It makes you look good." Ethan felt something cold settle inside him. She didn't just erase everything he had done for her. She had dragged his business into her lies without thinking twice. She wasn't just ungrateful, she was reckless. That was the moment Ethan finally understood that Madison didn't value his support, his sacrifices, or even his livelihood. She saw him as someone she could use whenever she needed something: money, credibility, a story to pad her resume, and then push aside once she got what she wanted. The discovery didn't just hurt him. It opened his eyes. Madison hadn't simply betrayed him emotionally. She had crossed into a place where her lies could damage his life, his career, and everything he had worked for. And for the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't something he could ignore anymore. Ethan spent the next few days torn between two painful choices. On one side, he felt deeply betrayed by everything Madison had done, erasing his help, lying about her education, using his business without permission. On the other side, she was still his sister. He didn't want to ruin her chances of getting the job she had worked for. Even if she had treated him horribly, he couldn't forget the little girl he used to help with homework, the sister he once believed in. Every night he lay awake thinking about that letter from the design firm. He knew they expected him to confirm her apprenticeship, but if he lied for her, it could hurt his shop's reputation. If he told the truth, she might lose her job offer. Both options felt wrong, and he hated that she had put him in this position. He hadn't caused this. He hadn't pushed her to lie. She had done that on her own, but he still felt guilty even thinking about exposing her. He tried to talk himself into staying quiet. Maybe the company wouldn't follow up. Maybe they wouldn't check the details closely. Maybe things would work out without him having to do anything. But the weight of the situation never left him. He knew that if he didn't say something, he would be part of her lie, not by choice, but by silence. He didn't like being trapped between loyalty and honesty. Just when he was trying to figure out what to do, Madison showed up at his place without warning. She walked into his living room without even asking if it was a good time, acting like she owned the place. Ethan could tell from the way she talked fast and avoided eye contact that she wanted something. She didn't waste time getting to the point. "I need money," she said. "I found an apartment near the design district, and I have to put down a deposit today. It's only $5,000. You can afford that." Ethan stared at her, shocked. After everything she had said, everything she had done, she still thought he would just hand over more money. He tried to stay calm. "Madison, I can't do that." She scoffed like he had just made the most unreasonable statement in the world. "You owe me," she said confidently. "You always said you wanted to help me. This is part of that. If you really cared, you would support me." "Owe you?" Ethan repeated quietly. "How do I owe you?" Madison crossed her arms, annoyed. "Because you've been trying to make me feel guilty about the past. If you don't want me to think you're bitter, then prove it. Help me out." Ethan felt something shift inside him. Her words weren't just selfish, they were manipulative. She didn't appreciate anything he had done. She didn't care about the pressure he carried. She only saw him as a source of money, nothing more. He realized then that she would keep using him for as long as he allowed it. She would lie, twist the truth, and demand more, all while pretending he didn't matter. She wouldn't stop, not unless he stopped her. And in that moment, the last piece of sympathy he had left simply disappeared. He finally understood that protecting her meant sacrificing himself, and she would never do the same for him. Ethan didn't make the decision quickly or out of anger. It came slowly, after days of thinking, replaying every moment in his head, and realizing there was no excuse left for Madison's behavior. She had lied about him, used his business, rewritten her past, and then come to his home demanding money, as if she had a right to it. Her actions weren't mistakes. They were choices she kept making over and over again. So when he finally picked up the letter from the design firm again, he felt strangely calm. He wasn't trying to ruin her life. He wasn't trying to get even. He simply understood that he couldn't protect her from the consequences of lies she had created herself. If he kept quiet, he would be saying he agreed with her behavior. And he didn't. The next morning, before opening the shop, he sat down at his desk and called the number listed in the letter. His voice was steady as he explained who he was and why he was calling. He wasn't emotional. He didn't rant or vent. He just told the truth. He said Madison had never apprenticed at his auto shop. He said she had never worked there in any capacity. He said he had no record of supervising any design-related tasks. The woman on the phone paused, surprised. She politely asked a few more questions, about timelines, about documents, about the duties Madison had listed. Ethan answered everything honestly. He didn't push for any outcome. He didn't ask for anything to happen. He simply made sure they had accurate information. When the call ended, Ethan felt a heavy weight lift off his chest. He hadn't attacked his sister. He hadn't exaggerated a single detail. He had only corrected a serious lie that involved his name and his business. Whatever happened next would be based on the truth. Not revenge, not bitterness, just reality catching up. But reality moved fast. The firm called him again 2 days later. This time, the tone was much more serious. They explained that they had reviewed Madison's application and found several inconsistencies. Not just about the apprenticeship, but about internships she had listed at 2 other places. One company had no record of her at all. Another confirmed she applied but never worked there. They told Ethan they were opening a formal verification process. They would be contacting multiple references, cross-checking school records, and reviewing the documents she submitted. Ethan listened quietly, offering any clarification they needed. When he hung up the phone, he didn't feel proud or triumphant. He felt tired, but also strangely relieved. For the first time, the situation wasn't sitting entirely on his shoulders. Someone else was handling it, professionals who could see the truth without the emotional history behind it. He didn't tell anyone what he had done. He didn't brag about it. He didn't even think of it as revenge. It was simply him choosing to stop protecting a lie that had become bigger than he ever expected. And deep down, he knew that Madison had created this outcome long before he ever picked up the phone. Madison never expected everything to fall apart so fast. When the design firm finished their verification, they withdrew the job offer without hesitation. They sent her a formal notice explaining that the information on her application did not match their findings. Madison tried to argue, but nothing she said could cover the lies she had written. The opportunity she had been bragging about for weeks was gone instantly, and there was nothing she could do to get it back. The college she attended also received the report. Since her internship hours were part of her academic requirements, they opened an investigation. Madison was asked to come in for a meeting, and she sat there quietly as the committee explained that falsifying academic records was a serious violation. She tried to act confused and innocent, but her confidence cracked when they showed the documents she had submitted. The college placed her under review, meaning her graduation status was suddenly uncertain. For someone who had talked endlessly about her future success, it was a blow she never saw coming. The people she had tried so hard to impress also started stepping away. The professional contacts she used to brag about stopped replying to her messages. Some unfollowed her online, and others simply cut the conversation short. They didn't want to be associated with someone caught lying on official documents. Even the friends she boasted to became distant. Slowly, she realized she had built her reputation on shaky ground, and now everything was collapsing because of her own choices. The apartment she wanted also slipped out of her reach. Without the new job, she couldn't afford the deposit, and when the landlord reviewed her information, they refused to move forward. Madison had already told people she was moving into a luxury space, but now she had to watch someone else take it. She tried to act like she didn't care, but she knew the truth. She had nothing lined up anymore. Every part of her life that she expected to rise suddenly stopped. Instead of celebrating her future, she was dealing with emails, warnings, and damaged relationships. Madison felt the pressure closing in from every direction. For the first time, she couldn't find someone else to blame. Her confident attitude, her arrogance, and her lies had all come back to her. The world she tried to build on false stories was falling apart piece by piece, and she was left standing in the middle of it, unable to stop the destruction she had caused herself. Madison didn't wait long before confronting Ethan. One afternoon, she showed up at his house unannounced, her face red with anger. She stormed past the doorway, slamming it behind her, and immediately started yelling. "You ruined my life. I had everything lined up, and now it's all gone because of you." Ethan didn't flinch. He was sitting at his kitchen table, quietly drinking coffee, as if he had expected this moment. Madison paced back and forth, throwing her hands in the air, her voice shaking with frustration and disbelief. She blamed him for the job she lost, the apartment she couldn't secure, and the academic trouble she was facing. "I helped you," Ethan said calmly, though his voice carried a quiet weight. "I worked hard so you could have what I couldn't. And what did I get in return? Lies, disrespect, and demands." Madison paused, trying to catch her breath. "You don't understand. You should have supported me. You had no right to get involved with my life." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, Madison. You don't get it. You destroyed your life the moment you decided to destroy me. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped covering for you." Her face fell. For a moment, the anger that had filled her eyes turned into confusion. She wanted to argue, to shout, to blame him further, but she realized she had been expecting him to be the villain in her story. Instead, he was simply stating the truth. You never wanted revenge?" she asked, her voice almost whispering now. "You didn't do this to hurt me?" Ethan's gaze was steady. "I never wanted revenge, Madison. All I ever wanted was respect. That's it. Respect for the sacrifices I made, respect for the honesty I expected from you, and respect for the family bond one thought we had." Madison's chest heaved as she struggled to find words. She looked down, ashamed, realizing how her arrogance and lies had backfired. She had assumed that Ethan's silence and patience meant weakness, that he could be manipulated without consequence. But she had misjudged him completely. I didn't think," she stammered, unable to finish the sentence. She had wanted to make him look small, to make her success appear all her own. But now she saw clearly that the only person she had hurt was herself. Ethan stood up, towering calmly over her. "It's too late for apologies, Madison. The consequences of your choices are yours to face. I'm not your enemy. I'm the person who gave you every chance to do the right thing. You chose otherwise." She sank into a chair, exhausted and defeated. For the first time, she understood that Ethan's actions weren't motivated by revenge. He had only stopped covering for her, and that simple truth had exposed everything she had tried to hide. Madison finally realized that no matter how angry she was, she could not shift the blame anymore. Ethan had done nothing wrong. The only person responsible for her ruined plans was herself, and facing that truth was more painful than anything he could have done to her. And in that moment, Ethan felt a quiet sense of closure. The betrayal had ended, the lies had been exposed, and the family bond she broke would never be the same. But at least the truth had finally been heard. After the confrontation, Madison's life changed completely. The design firm made it clear she would never be hired there, and the college demanded she redo her internship hours before they would consider her for graduation. She had no choice but to accept the consequences of her actions. To support herself while completing her requirements, she took a retail job at a store downtown. It wasn't the glamorous career she had planned, and the reality of working long hours for minimum wage humbled her in ways she had never experienced before. Her friends and professional contacts who once admired her distanced themselves. People who had once looked up to her as ambitious and talented now saw the mistakes she had made. Every conversation reminded her of what she had lost because of lies and pride. She realized that success built on dishonesty could crumble in an instant. Madison spent long nights reflecting on her decisions, recognizing that every choice she had made to manipulate or deceive had brought her to this difficult place. Meanwhile, Ethan began to rebuild his own sense of peace. He focused on his work at the auto shop, taking pride in the business he had built from the ground up. For the first time in months, he felt relief instead of anger or stress. He stopped worrying about Madison or her attempts to control him. The humiliation, the betrayal, and the lies had all left a mark, but they also taught him a valuable lesson about boundaries and trust. He realized that helping someone didn't mean sacrificing his own well-being, especially when that person didn't appreciate or respect his sacrifices. The family, who had initially been unaware of the full situation, began to understand what had really happened. Once they learned how Madison had lied, misrepresented herself, and treated Ethan with cruelty, they fully supported him. Family members who had once questioned his intentions apologized for not seeing the truth sooner. Ethan felt validated, not just for the actions he had taken, but for choosing honesty and integrity over being manipulated. As for Madison, She slowly began to understand the depth of her mistakes. The retail job, the extra internship hours, and the distance from her professional goals forced her to grow in ways she hadn't expected. She had to face herself, her poor decisions, and the fact that her choices had consequences. The comfort and pride she had taken for granted were gone, replaced by hard work, reflection, and a need to rebuild her reputation honestly. Ethan, on the other hand, carried a lesson with him that would stay forever. He understood that helping family was a noble act, but it could also become dangerous if someone turned it into an opportunity to betray and manipulate. He had given generously, but now he knew when to say no. His strength came not just from the money he earned or the sacrifices he made, but from realizing his own worth and refusing to let anyone treat him like a stepping stone again. Looking back, he often thought quietly to himself, "Helping family is a blessing, until it becomes a weapon they turn against you." It was a lesson learned the hard way, but it gave him clarity, peace, and the confidence to move forward without regret.